Okay, here's now part two from our equations of circles notes. And this is when we're going to learn how to convert from a general form of an equation to the center radius form of equation. See, general form looks like this right here, where you have x squared plus y squared plus a times x plus b times y plus c equals 0. So you have this kind of written all out with all the x's and the y's and such. And we want to convert that into what we just learned about was center radius form, because this form helps us to really graph the circle much easier when you know the center and you know the radius. But since you can be given equations that are in general form and we want to be able to learn how to graph those equations and know some specific information about them, like the center and the radius, then we need to learn how to convert them from general to center radius. So here we have an equation that says x squared plus y squared plus 14x minus 8y plus 1 equals 0. And you wouldn't maybe recognize this, but it is the equation of a circle because you have both an x squared term and a y squared term plus an x term plus a y term. All of those things tell me that this is the equation of some circle. But we're going to do this process called completing the square. And what this process does is it helps me figure out to go from general to center radius form. And so I have this kind of like written out step by step and how we're going to do this. So here's the first thing was we would just write the given equation. Okay. And then my next step is I'm going to kind of rearrange this equation. And I said, first, we're going to write all the x terms. So the x terms are the x squared and the 14x. So I put both of those two terms together, and they brought them here as the first portion of this equation. And then we're going to write the y terms with a plus blank. Okay, so you have a y term right there. You've got a y term right here. Now remember, carry along with the negative 8y with this to bring it over here. And then you have this y squared minus 8y, and then we're going to have this plus blank. Okay, and the third thing is we're going to take the quote unquote c term, this plus 1, and we're going to move it over to the other side of the equal sign. So you notice how my plus 1 equals 0 became equals negative 1 because I had to subtract 1 on both sides here to get the 1 over here. And here's essentially what I'm going to do. In math language, I'm going to take this binomial, this two-term little x squared plus 14x, and I'm going to write it in a what we call a perfect square trinomial. So that's what this plus blank is right here. I'm going to figure out what do I have to add to these two terms to make this binomial a perfect square trinomial. And essentially, whatever I add in this spot right here, I have to also add on the other side of the equal sign because I'm keeping the equation balanced. I'm not going to change the equation of the circle. I'm just rearranging the equation of the circle. And then again, whatever I do right here and add to the y terms, I have to also add to my other side of the equal sign here. Now, how do I figure out what it is I'm going to add? You see here I added 49 and there I added 16. Why did I do that? Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the value of a. Do you remember where a was? The a term is this term that's in front of the x, the coefficient of x. And so I took this value of a, which was 14. And if you take 14 and you divide that by 2, you get 7. And then what we're going to do is we're going to square 7, and that's where 49 comes from. Okay. Likewise, I'm going to take my b term, which was the 8 or the negative 8. It doesn't really matter because what's going to happen is if I take my negative 8 and I divide it by 2, then you get negative 4. But see, what we're going to do is we're going to take this value and we're going to square it. And whether it's positive or negative, when you square it, it's going to be a positive 16. So that's where I got the 16 from. But I also, again, I added both a 16 on the left side of the equal sign, which is right here, and to the right side. Whereas I also added the 49 to both the left side and the right side. Okay, now let's talk about y. The reason why I would do this, make this binomial into this trinomial, is because of something called factoring. And when we factor this trinomial, I know this is taking you way back to your algebra days, but when you factor a trinomial, we want to basically figure out how we can break this down into two numbers that multiply that would make this trinomial. And because it's this perfect square, all we are going to do, or because we made this a quote unquote perfect square trinomial, then you see how I took this number 7 that I got when I did b divided by 2, or a divided by 2 and b divided by 2. I take that number and I simply put that number in here where you have the x term. So I have x plus 7 squared. And then likewise here, when I took the b and I divided by 2, it was a minus 4. So I did y minus 4 squared equals, and then the last part was I simply am adding all of this together. See, these are all like terms. -1 plus 49 plus another 16 adds to a total of 64. Okay. And now the beauty of this is I started with this general form of the circle, and I ended with this center radius form of the circle. So now I can say, well, I know the center point of this circle is the point -7 comma +4. You see how I changed the value of those signs. This was a +7, so it's a minus, and a -4, so it's a positive. And that the radius, r, is equal to the square root of the number 64. So that is equal to 8. So by rewriting this equation, I was able to determine what the center is and what the radius length is. Okay, let's try one more example like this together and just kind of like follow along with this. So here I go, I have an equation and that's written in standard form or general form, and I want to determine the center and the radius of this. So first I'm going to convert this into center radius form. So let's start by writing all of the x terms first. So you have x squared, and then you have a plus 6x, and then I'm going to say plus blank, because I'm going to turn this binomial into a trinomial. Okay, and then I'm going to switch over to my y terms, and then I have a positive y squared, and I have a -2y, and then I'm going to say again plus blank. Okay, and then lastly, I have the c term that's right here. See, the c was a -15, but I'm going to move the -15 to the other side of the equal sign. So I'm going to add 15 to both sides. So I'm going to have a positive 15 here. Now, remember that I'm also, whatever I do on the left, I have to do to the right side of the equal sign as well. So I'm going to add in whatever this number is, and I'm also going to add in whatever that number is. Isn't Cami great with our color coordinating here? Okay, so now let's figure out what it is I'm going to add. So I'm going to take this b term, the a, the positive 6, and I'm going to divide that number by 2. That gives me a positive 3. And then I'm going to square 3 to get the number 9. So the 9 is the number that I'm going to add on both sides of the equal sign here to complete this trinomial. Now let's talk about the y term. So I'm going to take the value of b, which is a -2. And I'm going to divide that by +2. The difference, or the quotient there, is a -1. And I'm going to take that term and square -1. That gives me a +1. So I'm going to add another 1 to both sides here and here. Okay, now we're going to factor this trinomial, the x part of the trinomial, and then we're going to factor the y part of the trinomial, and then we'll just combine all these numbers over here. So my x's is going to have this. It's going to have an x, and then it's going to have a number, and I'm going to square that number. And the number is, I take the 3 that's right here, and it's going to go +3. So x plus 3 squared is the first part, and then I'm going to have a plus sign. You see, the plus sign really comes from this plus sign that's right there. That's coming down here. And now I'm going to factor this trinomial right here with a set of parentheses that I'm going to have squared. So here's my y terms, and the number that's going to go right here is this -1 right here. So it's going to go y minus 1 squared. And then lastly, I'm going to combine all of these like terms. 15 plus 9 is 24, plus 1 more is 25. So now I am ready to say I know about what I know about this equation. I know the coordinates for the center point are the x value will be a -3 because I'm changing that sign, and the y value will be a +1. So there's the coordinates for the center point, and the radius is the square root of 25, which is 5. So this is me, quote unquote, completing the square to determine the center and the radius of a circle that was written in standard form or general form, and then I rewrote it in the center radius form.